Hey everybody, my name is Sebastian Magnac, and I'm going to give you a quick demo or really give you the art of what's possible with ServiceNow to be able to generate dynamic cloud credentials using ServiceNow with HashiCorp Vault. So within our environment, what we're going to have is we're going to have Vault deployed locally in our own data center itself. We're going to be running this mid server that communicates to ServiceNow. And every time we make a request from ServiceNow, this mid server is going to make an API call to this Vault server to be able to do the specific desired task we want it to do. So inside of ServiceNow, we have this platform that's called Flow Designer. And Flow Designer is going to be this feature that I'm using to help automate processes really in a single design environment. Flow Designer really allows users to use natural language to automate approvals, tasks, notifications, records, and operate really within this low to no code interface itself. Within Vault, we're going to be deploying 3 secrets engines, Azure, AWS, and GCP. And these secrets engines are going to allow Vault to dynamically generate and manage access credentials to these 3 clouds. So as we request temporary access to Azure, GCP, or AWS, Vault's going to be able to give us that access, and ServiceNow is going to be able to act as this self-service portal itself, because inside of ServiceNow, we're going to have this form that's going to go into some change management, process that's going to go into some approval, a process to a team, and then once approved, really what's going to happen is this user who requested access is going to get those credentials, because once that's approved, it's going to communicate to the mid server. The mid server is going to make a call to Vault, and Vault's going to get the credentials back and then send the data back to, well, in this case, to ServiceNow. And ServiceNow is going to send it back to the user itself. So let's kind of see how this would look in action itself. So this is Flow Designer that kind of identifies our processes. And if we go to ServiceNow, we have our catalog item, so temporary cloud credentials. And inside this catalog item, we can specify who's requesting it. So in this case, it's just a dev environment. I'm just a system administrator. When do I need access? And which environment I need access to, Azure, AWS, GCP. So when we click on this order, this is going to start to do a flow process. And it's going to go into Flow Designer. So I'm going to click on order to get me access to AWS credentials. And what happens in this flow process, we get this request being created. So I can click on this request. This is now, or this flow was now sent to whoever the manager is or team lead to approve this case. So they would have received an email to be able to see that. And if we look at our email or our outbound email itself, we see that, okay, somebody just requested access right now, and we need some type of approval to happen. So let's jump back into this request. We're going to click on this request number. We see that it requires approval. So Adele needs to approve this request. Because I'm the system administrator, I can kind of overwrite this. I can click on request. I see that this user wants access to AWS. I'm going to approve this. And if we take a look at the workflow, this is where kind of all the magic happens. What happens in here is through that service catalog item that occurred, we grab the variables. For example, if it's AWS. So if the session, or if it's AWS that was selected, one, we're going to create a change ticket or a change task so we can track everything. We're going to ask for approval in here. So we have an approval trigger on who's going to approve this. This could be assigned to a person or team. And then we're going to execute the specific API call towards Vault. So if we actually take a look at this, we're making an API call, and we've got the output of the key or the AWS key and the AWS secret at the time and the duration. And then after that, what happens is there's an email sent. And really what this is just kind of a logical flow, or more like an if statement, as if we select AWS, because that's the condition, perform these tasks. If we select Azure, perform these tasks. If we select GCP, perform these tasks. So we can create this flow for us itself. And if we take a look at our outbound email, in here, we could see that, yes, Sebastian did receive that credentials. And just to make everything kind of see from one screen, you can kind of click on preview, and I would have received this email. All right, system administrator, here's your access to the environment. You have 600 seconds or 5 hours, 2 hours, whatever we decide to use these credentials in the environment itself. And the same kind of concept happens if we want to get Azure. So if we click on our service catalog, and I want to get access to the Azure environment, I'm going to select Azure. I'm going to order this request. An email is going to be sent to my team lead, my manager, with this request ID that they need approval is required. So they'll be able to see this ticket inside their email request. They're going to have to approve this request or reject it. So just as an administrator, we're going to do that. Do you want access to Azure? Yes, I do. We approve it. Once this is approved, we can kind of take a look at the flow like we did before, but this time instead of doing AWS, we're actually going to click into the Azure because Azure was selected, create the change task, create the approval process, and now we're in a state where Azure is going out, or Vault is going out to Azure to be able to grab the dynamic credentials for that user. And once these credentials have been selected, an email's been sent. So we can see the complete here. And if we go back to our outbound mail system, we see that, yes, this user requested access. It was approved. The request was created, and an email was sent to me as the system administrator with my client ID and my client secret. That's going to last for a specific period of time. So this is a quick way or an easy way to be able to utilize ServiceNow with Vault to provide a self-service portal to grab credentials and also have this huge audit log from the Vault perspective and also from a ServiceNow perspective where we're tracking who and what has access to this environment itself. And if we dive into Flow Designer, let me show you how this works itself. The first thing we have to do is build a service catalog inside of Flow Designer. Then if I click on it, it's pretty simple, just a service catalog. You can click on the plus sign. That's the first trigger. Then inside of it, we have a subset of actions. So the first set of action is based on that service catalog and the request, we're going to gather this type of information. We're going to gather the request and which cloud would the user use. We're going to grab those variables. And you can see on the right-hand side that we have the actual variables are populated here. So the request for provides all the information about the user: name, email, location, domains, phone number. So we have these variables to use. And we can see that when we click on the cloud, it's really just a choice in here. So if we go to our next statement, what we have is we click on the plus sign and we click this flow logic. So we build an if statement. So create an if statement. The condition is we grab this variable that is from the catalog and literally we just drag it in and say if they select AWS, what do I want to do? I want to make another decision. So what happens is then we have this then we kind of click on the plus signs here and create a change request. We create another plus sign and we create ask for approval. So we're asking for approval. We're specifying a specific user. We can specify a team, a group within ServiceNow in here. And then literally if we click on plus, we get all the actions here. So ask for approval kind of populates. And then within this action, we have sub actions, or within this flow, we have actions. And then if you take a look at here, we have our flow, which is our HashiCorp Vault Cloud Credential Engine. Then we have actions within here, and these actions are how we interact with Vault. So let me take a look at AWS secrets here. So this action allows us to grab AWS secrets from Vault, and it's pretty basic. Don't recommend this way. There's ways to secure things in ServiceNow, but all I'm doing is I have, if I click here, I specify my local Vault server and IP address. I'm just running it in a demo. I have my mid server, and literally all I'm grabbing is the path. I'm just sending an API call, a GET request to Vault to get my credentials. So if I look at Vault, I have my AWS and I have my role name. And this allows me to do a GET on AWS creds my role. And then what I'm doing after that is I'm actually grabbing the output of that. So I have an example output here, and I'm parsing this JSON in here into more variables. So all the data points that are going to come out of the output are actually data points that I can use to provide more actions and more services. And that's really what I'm doing. So if we take a look on the right hand side, that when we're parsing this response body from the first task, we can see that we get the request ID, lease ID, duration, access key. And so now all these become variables for us to use. So then what we can do is we can create an output of that inside this action that says, okay, AWS key matches this variable. And it's as easy as me dragging this variable into here to provide that output action for that data. So once that request happens, we can close this down and we can go back to our flow designer in here. And the next step is that once this task is executed, we can then literally just send an email address, and we have the target or the target of record, which is this ticket. We specify the user because that's one of the variables we populated at the beginning. So we can see all these kind of variables and flows through here. So we have requester for. So who's it for? We will find the user's email address and we can paste that as easy as drag and drop. Just as if we're building out this email message, we can provide the first name of that user, the last name, any information. And then of course, because we created that output from that JSON parse, we can then literally just grab the credentials or grab those variables in a very simple way to build our email or our output. So then the next step is, because I just did this for AWS, I'm really doing another else if statement in here. And if the service catalog or that variable is Azure, I'm going to perform the same type of tasks, create a record, ask for approval, create the actual REST API call for Azure. So same, other than the F5 access, that doesn't mean anything, but same thing. I'm just specifying the path that the credential is located and that I have access to. I'm parsing the JSON output here. And I'm outputting it in here, so then we can use it in our flow for the email address. And of course, for GCP, we have another option in here. So it's pretty straightforward on what we're doing from a flow designer. And we can even take a look at how we attach this flow designer to that service catalog. So if we go to our service catalog builder here, we can see we have our service catalog, temporary cloud. I can go to edit this catalog, and I can give it some, name, a short description, provide, a nice little description of what's happening in here, provide location, what catalog or categories it belongs to, create a specific question, so who's the requester for, and which cloud would you like to use. And if we kind of open this up, you can see that that was the variable that I was getting. So based on these choices and these values, that if statement is going to be executed itself. And then from access perspective, all we have to, or fulfillment perspective, just make this a little bigger, all we have to do is click on fulfillment and select that flow engine that we created to be able to grab that info. And then once this is really complete, you can just click on submit and review, and it will build us this type of service catalog that once again allows us to order a request for any of the cloud providers. Based on who the approver is, this ticket email is going to be sent to that owner of that team. Once that individual approves that request, that flow is going to get kicked off to connect to Vault to grab the dynamic credentials. And those credentials are going to be emailed out through ServiceNow. And there's other ways we can provide access to those credentials. But just from a demo perspective, it's going to send an email to that user and give you that temporary access to go ahead and do whatever you want in that cloud. So with that, thank you very much. That was a quick guide and demo on how to generate dynamic cloud credentials using a ServiceNow portal with HashiCorp Vault.